Item 10B, receive staff report and consider repeal of Chapter 4.40 regarding massage establishments and a revised massage establishment ordinance.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. While we wait for Chief Telford and Lieutenant Caldwell to come up to the table, I'd like to thank the two of them for helping out with reviewing both the draft of this report, the draft of the ordinance, the PowerPoint presentation, and thanks also go to efforts by David Woltering, your Community Development Director, as well as Joanne Ryan in the Finance Department, who processes many of the business license applications. So I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to bring you back to 2008. That was the year that, prior to which cities could, in essence, fully regulate massage establishments. There were many legitimate massage practitioners and establishments. Unfortunately, there were also some that were engaged in illegitimate practices. And the ones who were not doing so were concerned and became concerned about regulations all over the state, where each city could impose their own regulations and separate license fees, making it difficult and expensive for legitimate practitioners to practice their trade in different cities, both in the Bay Area and across the state. So what happened was, in 2008, the legislature created something called the CAMTC, that's the California Massage Therapy Council. And it's a nonprofit public benefit corporation whose mission it was to provide uniform qualifications and regulations for to license all of the massage practitioners and businesses in the state of California. Now, one interesting thing about this organization and its permitting system was that nobody was actually required to get a permit from the organization. It was purely voluntary. You could if you wanted to, but you didn't have to. But if you were certified by the CAMTC, then cities couldn't impose a regulatory license or a separate permit, and they couldn't charge you a licensing fee greater than for other professionals. So even though the system was voluntary, as you saw in my staff report, I thought it was kind of interesting. Over a 3 or 4 year period since the CAMTC was adopted, we had over 45,000 applications for massage permits, so it became a popular thing to do. Partly in response to that, after CAMTC was passed, cities amended their ordinances to deal with the implications of the new law. Some cities wanted to ban establishments. They wanted to establish a moratorium so they could study the situation. There was a proliferation of massage establishments that cities didn't think was a good idea. What San Bruno did instead in 2009 was adopted what was at that point a best practices ordinance, which was a 2-tier regulatory system. So in other words, if you were certified by the CAMTC, then you could practice massage in the city of San Bruno without significant additional regulatory constraints. But if you weren't certified under the CAMTC, you could still practice massage in the city, but you had to go through a background check and all kinds of other things. And that, at the time, was authorized under the state law as it existed. So what happened in 2011 is the state amended the ordinance to further constrain local regulation. Oh, now it worked. So what the state law said was that you can't adopt a moratorium, you can't ban massage establishments except in very limited circumstances when you're putting a moratorium on all other kinds of professional services like dentists and doctors and so on, lawyers and so on and so forth. The state law also said that if you're zoning in the city, you have to treat massage businesses in the same way as any other professional service. And so as a result of that, most of the local preemption, or most of the local regulation was in essence preempted or constrained by state law. So what happened after 2011 is the cities began amending the ordinances to conform with the law, and they felt, as we do, that amendment of their local ordinance is important, not only to conform to state law, but also so that we can continue enforcing those things in our local ordinance that we're allowed to do still under state law. It's also an opportunity to revisit the 2-tier system that the city had, which is allowing all massage therapists, irrespective of whether they were CAMTC certified or not. So, What we're proposing tonight is your review of an ordinance that requires a couple of things. First of all, that all massage practitioners have a CAMTC permit. And so even though nobody's making a massage practitioner go to the state agency and get a permit, our ordinance would say if you want to practice massage in San Bruno, you have to have a CAMTC permit. That's the regulation. And in addition to that, all massage establishments, so if you have more than one practitioner doing massage in a particular place, every one of those people needs to be CAMTC certified. So once they are, then all of those individuals can obtain what's called a certificate of registration from the city, and that's just a document that says, yes, we see that you are, we've done our review of your paperwork and you're okay. The ordinance would also require a yearly renewal. It would restrict hours of operation to what are normal business hours in most of those zoning districts. We also clarified the process to suspend or revoke those certificates of registration if there is a problem. Interestingly, the ordinance also allows a grace period to September to become CAMTC certified. So if you want to practice in San Bruno and you're not certified right now, you can become certified. You'll have a number of months to do that, and we don't think that's going to be an issue for most people. The other thing about the ordinance is that it sunsets in 2016, and you might wonder, well, why is that? And the answer is because state law that created the CAMTC also sunsets in 2016, unless it's amended, repealed, or something. We don't know what's going to happen. So we want to make sure that whatever new ordinance we adopt is consistent with state law, both in terms of its content and in terms of its effect. So the real question is, what does all this mean? And it means a couple of things. It means that state law does continue to constrain our local measures to prevent or deter illicit activity that might be occurring at some of these institutions. The result is, and Neil and Jeff can talk about this further, that it's going to have to shift our focus in terms of enforcement from a proactive or from a upfront prevention deterrence standpoint to an after the fact. We get a complaint, we understand there's some illicit or criminal behavior potentially going on, and then we have to do some enforcement about it. So the result of that is that we think there may be additional resources needed in the police department, and we also think that our office may be involved in more civil enforcement through the court system if we can't get CAMTC to take action on individuals who we've determined are violating the law in some way. So we just have a couple of next steps. First of all, I'll obviously for you to provide comments and tell us your thoughts about the proposed ordinance, if any. And then to come back to some of your subsequent meetings, introduce and adopt the new ordinance. But in the meantime, staff has already been working closely internally to implement what I would refer to as an enhanced and more coordinated review system, both for the new and existing practitioners and establishments. So we'll do whatever we can to make sure that both the current establishments are complying with the law and any new ones that may want to come in are also doing the same thing. So that concludes my staff report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Mark? Ken?
Mr. Chair, what is the application process for the CAMTC? Is it just a paper, and is there a test? Yeah.
So it's a very, I would say, complex or potentially complex process. What the CAMTC requires is a certain number of hours from particular schools that are approved by the state in massage therapy, and the number of hours depends on a couple of different factors. The CAMTC then is supposed to do a background check and other investigations to make sure that the person is a legitimate massage practitioner. And then thereupon they issue a license. What we have found, unfortunately, is just because somebody has a license doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to engage in some criminal activity, and I've given you some examples of that in the staff report, which is what gives us pause to think that the CAMTC has either the resources or the wherewithal to properly investigate each and every one of these tens of thousands, literally, of licensees that are coming in. So that's the challenge that the city has, is to make sure that in a way that the CAMTC is doing their job.
So it's not really a matter of whether you're a good masseuse or not. It's whether you're using it as a front.
That's correct.
Anything else?
Through the chair.
Michael?
Is there any mechanism for recovering money from the state when they do something that creates hardship on our ability to protect our citizens?
Well, it's an interesting question. There's an entire body of state law called unfunded mandates, and there's a process by which cities can, in theory, and I emphasize the words in theory, recover money for unfunded state mandates. I think the short answer to your question is not from a practical standpoint.
Okay. Thank you.
Very quick, just on Councilmember Salazar, because even the state regulates and sets most of the precedent on what the city can and cannot do. And in essence, we can't charge a different business license structure, therefore to recoup costs. And so really our hands are tied that the state has put forth its standards and, again, like you said, unfunded mandates.
They are. I mean, the only additional possibility is if there is civil litigation against a massage establishment under, for example, a state law called the Red Light Abatement Act. That's a statute under which the city can recover its costs and attorney's fees for doing so. But it's more difficult for the city to recover just the ongoing actual costs of monitoring and investigating these establishments to make sure that they are complying with state law.
Would you like to address the council? Yes. Yeah. Step right to the microphone. Tell us your name and your street, please.
I'm Beverly May. I'm Director of Governmental Affairs for the California Massage Therapy Council. I actually live in Belmont, and so I know Mark from there. Well, I was thinking there was no 3-minute timer, so I had a ton of notes, but I'll try and be as quick as possible. Unfortunately, I had spoken to Lieutenant Caldwell and sent him some sample ordinances a while ago, but I unfortunately didn't see this until today, so I just did a very quick review. I do have a few comments on it and comments just on the discussion in general. CAMTC doesn't endorse any ordinances, but we do have given out samples. I see that a lot of this has come from Redwood City Ordinance, which was drafted by your former city attorney, Pam Thompson. And what we've learned is that the concept of the revocable registration is actually a creative interpretation of the law. It's not in statute. There are some cities that have not put it in because they're concerned of a legal challenge, but it is the trend. A number of cities are putting it in. We actually are trying to get we have gotten that language into legislation this session, AB 1147. We're also trying to get a mandated exam into that. That is in there, and we're hoping that this bill will move forward. The revocable registration has been a very useful tool, and Redwood City has just closed 1 or 2 long-standing establishments. I know the county has closed them just using the revocable registration, where they haven't had the resources for nuisance abatement, which is very time-consuming and expensive, and they've just been able to revoke under the lower standard of the revocable registration. I am concerned about some of the statements in the staff report. I don't deny them, but CAMTC takes very seriously illegitimate behavior in the profession. We do a very thorough background check. Lieutenant Caldwell probably gets emails all the time from people he doesn't know, because we send an email blast to our contact in every city where an applicant has listed as home or work for the last 10 years. And many times we get information that is not on the DOJ report or FBI report. Our standards are a civil standard, so we have a lower standard to deny, revoke, or suspend, and we do work very effectively. We're moving, increasing our professional standards division, and our professional standards division is actually, the director spent 32 years with LAPD, 28 of those in Vice. his whole division are ex-vice officers and attorneys. So he's got a very good and effective division. Like your city, we can't deny somebody if their background, if their education holds up and their background is clean. And a lot of times, as you know, there are people who are prostitutes and they just haven't been caught yet, or sexual predators, which we get a lot of complaints of as well. We do have very effective means for denying, suspending, and revoking that have been enhanced this year with the passage of SB 1238. Lieutenant Caldwell is aware of our officer declarations. We can take a declaration even if charges haven't been filed or there's been a acquittal. We can sometimes act based on the first-person report. One thing that your ordinance doesn't have, which is another tool that was in the SB 1238, is that it allows cities to prohibit a massage business from opening in the same location where one has been closed for criminal activity. And Huntington Beach was the first city to just enact that into an ordinance. That is a very important tool to help prevent the rotating door of closing a place down and a new owner takes it over, or the brother-in-law. Let's see, as far as the ordinance, as I said, I think it's mostly good. There's a few little things. One correction, the sunset date in the law hasn't been changed. Well, the sunset date has been moved to January 1st, 2015. So we have already begun that process. That's the opportunity where our law gets reviewed. That's an opportunity to make changes either to CAMTC, how we operate, or to the law itself. And we expect to be asking for quite a bit more authority for us and to assist cities. In section 4. Well, I don't know if you want me to go into sections, or if you are not going to vote on a first reading today, I can certainly work with Mark on it.
If I may, through the chair, it's wonderful to see Beverly again. We did work closely together on the Belmont massage ordinance, and we can certainly get together after the meeting. It's not slated for introduction tonight. It's just open for discussion, and we're very pleased to know that CAFTC is continuing to improve its efforts to work with cities, and especially when cities come up with information that calls into question whether an applicant or a licensee from CAMTC should have their license suspended or revoked. That's the kind of cooperation that cities are really looking for. So I'm very, very pleased to hear that, and we'll certainly work together with Beverly between now and the next meeting to incorporate some of those things that she talked about into the ordinance and make sure it's just as good as it can be.
Okay, is that all right with everybody?
Absolutely.
Okay, good idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, we'll...
Irene?
I just want to reemphasize the part about the revolving door and being able to prohibit that. I think that is extremely important.
Yeah.
Yes,
Along with
thank you.
everything else, but
That's a
that
great
one was-
suggestion. Thank you very much.